I'm standing in front of some bookshelves today in the hope that you'll think that I'm learned. Is it working? Never mind. Anyway, this is the first of two videos that emerged from a recent service we had at Cheltenham and Gloucester Unitarians that was all about the place of literature in our lives. And we did it because the Literature Festival was on, and that seemed an appropriate time to think about the place of reading, of stories, of words in our lives. And also it's quite convenient because my good friend Miles Salter, who is a storyteller and poet, was with us, and you'll hear from him in the second video in this series. But today I want to think particularly about reading and words and just strip that down a bit, because about 10 years ago I did a qualification in dyslexia. So it was about dyslexia awareness and kind of figuring out why some people struggle with the reading process. And one of the things that I found astonishing on that course was just how complicated a thing reading is. There is so much going on with it. You know, there is the science of what's going on in the brain, and people are still not in agreement about that. In fact, if you Google the phrase reading wars, you'll find that people really profoundly disagree on how we read. There's the science of what's going on with our eye movements. You know, when you're reading on a page, your eye is not moving smoothly across the page. It's stopping at fixed points, and there's this whole issue of, well, how does the brain figure out what those fixed points should be? So it really is a remarkable thing to be able to read at all. But maybe even more remarkable is our ability to use words, to develop language skills, and to become deeper people as a consequence of that. And one of the books that I've enjoyed in the last few years, look at this, it's like I planned this, is this book by Susie Dent, An Emotional Dictionary, which is basically, she wrote this book, I saw it at the Literature Festival a few years ago, and she said she wrote it because if only people had the words to express the way they felt, they would understand themselves more deeply and be able to thrive in the world. And one of the readings that I used in our service a couple of weeks ago from the Literature Festival was from someone called Brené Brown, who writes this: research is showing the importance of recognizing emotional granularity. So basically what they're arguing in this is that a lot of people have very few words to describe their emotions. Apparently a lot of people have only 3 or 4. And the research is demonstrating that to be anything like kind of emotionally stable or healthy, you need at least 30 words to describe the way that you're feeling. So for example, instead of happy, just happy, you want to be able to say, well, joyful, surprised. Instead of angry, it's regret, shame, guilt, humiliated, anxious, uncertain. It's deeper. That's what Brené Brown says. So having a large emotional vocabulary is quite important. And I read that and I thought, well, maybe the same is true of spiritual vocabulary. Maybe we need more words to describe what we're talking about. Maybe we need to work at that. And it made me think of a hymn that I remember singing a lot in my younger days by Walter Smith. See, I had to look that up. Walter Smith, who wrote it in 1867. And the hymn is a famous hymn. It's Immortal Invisible. And the first verse of that hymn is just someone using words to grasp towards something that is really beyond the power of words to express. So he writes, immortal, invisible, God only wise, in light, inaccessible, hid from our eyes, most blessed, most glorious, the ancient of days, almighty, victorious, thy great name we praise. So that's someone with a very kind of Victorian view perhaps, but someone trying to find words to express concepts of the divine, something beyond reach, really. And it made me think a little bit about kind of services I've done in the last couple of years. And I did one, I put one together on concepts of the divine, and God is a word that troubles a lot of people. It's a very small word, 3 letters, trying to do an enormous amount, an infinite amount, arguably. And for me, it's a word that can be as problematic as it is helpful. I don't know what it does for you. What does the word God make you feel? Is it an old man in the sky? Is it ground of all being? Lots of different phrases we could use. But I want to share with you today a poem that I used in a service a couple of years ago on the Divine by Thomas Rideout. And this is just an extract from his poem, but the poem is called God is No Noun, and I found this helpful. God is no noun, and certainly not an adjective. God is at least a verb, and even that shrinks her. We're getting Michelangelo all wrong. God is not the bearded one surrounded by angels, floating over the Sistine. He's not Adam with his muscled back pressing the earth. No. God is the closing inch of space between their reaching fingers. Have you heard the wood thrush when the sun glistens on the Huron? Can you see the flowers, how they speak to bees without a word? Still, God is no spring blossom, no wood thrush. God is neither the sun nor the bee. God is what you see in the blossom. God is when you hear the river and suddenly discover how much of it is part of you. To be clear, God is not you. God is somewhere in the 14 billion years which have come to mean that you are. God is, after all, at least a verb. God is waiting in the space between fingers that might connect. He is waiting for us to stop naming her. She is waiting for us to see all of him. God is waiting to be unshrunk.